Where can we run? Where can we hide? Is there a place that we can go where you cannot find us? You're there when we fall, there when we rise. Nothing is hidden from your face. You know every breath we take. Your love has found us. Your love has found us. We are yours forever. Your love has found us. It's all around us, holding us together. Nothing on earth, above or below. Nothing in all the universe can take us from your love. You came to us, made us your own. Now we will answer the call to come together, one for all. Your love has found us. Your love has found us. We are yours forever. Your love has found us. It's all around us, holding us together. Your love has found us. Your love has found us. We are yours forever. Your love has found us. It's all around us, holding us together. We will sing because your love has found us. Even in the darkest night, we'll sing because your love has set us free. We will sing because your love has found us. Even in the darkest night, we'll sing because your love has set us free. Your love has found us. Your love has found us. We are yours forever. Your love has found us. It's all around us, holding us together. Your love has found us. Your love has found us. We are yours forever. Your love has found us. It's all around us. We will sing because your love has found us. Even in the darkest night, we'll sing because your love has set us free. We will sing because your love has found us. Even in the darkest night, we'll sing because your love has set us free.
What? You're sitting down for that one? How can you do that? Is there super glue in these pews? We're gonna have to get this checked. Oh, well, I was back there bouncing around. I love that song. That gets me going. It's fired up. Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone who's here this evening. I appreciate you all coming on your Saturday and taking time to be with us. So I think that's a special thing. I think what we're doing here is important. Does anyone agree with me? No, how dare you? I do think this is important. We do have to get together, especially when it comes to spirituality. We got to come together. We got to have like-minded community, and this is one of the most valuable things that we can do as people. And I want to thank everyone who's watching us via live stream. We know you're not here physically, but we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us virtually, digitally, and spiritually. All right. I also want to welcome Josh. If you can see him back there, our sound guy. We missed him last Sunday because he was in a car accident. And thankfully, we were worried, but thankfully he came out relatively unscathed, a few bumps and bruises, but he's with us, so that's a miracle and we really appreciate. So if you see Josh, say thanks. He makes it happen. Okay. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this talk. And it's going to happen. There's no stopping it now. It's going to happen. Let me introduce you to Harry Church, one of the most influential people in the Unity movement and one of the most unknown people in the Unity movement simultaneously. Harry was Unity's first printer for the magazines and publications that the Fillmores were putting out at the very beginnings of our movement, of this ministry. And so he was helping to pump out the Unity magazines and the different things they were printing at that time, so he was responsible for that. So the publications and all the ways we first reached people in Unity was basically through his skill set. So Harry was an employee, and like most of their employees, the Fillmores saw Harry as a friend. They weren't just their employees, but they were their friends. Well, as the story goes, one evening in 1895, they invited Harry over to their house for dinner. And at this dinner, something completely unexpected and transformational occurred. Here's what happened. When they served Harry his food at the table, he looked at it in shock and exclaimed, "How can you stand to serve murdered things on the table?" You see, Harry was a Seventh-day Adventist and therefore a vegetarian, which is part of that faith. Now, granted, that is not the most polite way for a vegetarian to voice their concern about what they're being fed at a guest's house. He was very straightforward in that way. But Harry Church knew the Fillmores quite well and was shocked to see a disconnect between the message of oneness that they taught and the apparent lack of oneness in the way they ate. And it is not hard to imagine the Fillmores must have been embarrassed, must have been shocked, since they were basically being called hypocrites right there at their own kitchen table. Well, I said Harry was influential in the Unity movement because from that point forward, Charles and Myrtle stopped eating all animal products and started advocating for a strict vegetarian diet. But here is one of the reasons I so love our co-founders. They were absolutely authentic people. Because think about it. In that moment when Harry called them out at their own kitchen table, the Fillmores could have responded differently. They could have said, "Nah, you don't know what you're talking about, and who are you to judge us anyway?" Grumpy faces. But they were more spiritually mature than that. So instead, they went within. They took the situation within, and they asked themselves these questions, as I see it. Is there truth to this? If so, how must we adjust our lives to get back into alignment with truth? And there is no doubt that from the Fillmores' perspective, they saw truth in this, in what their friend Harry was telling them, because they did, in fact, adjust their lives to realign the way they thought and lived. So, this is sort of evidenced by the fact that in the writings and teachings they wrote since that time, and in the basic compiled Unity beliefs that they released around 1920, which we know today as Unity's 32 Statements of Faith. So, today we've been assigned statement number 28. I'm so excited. We've been building this up. Here it is finally. The banned statement that was removed from our movement, which says, "We believe that all life is sacred and that man should not kill or be party to the killing of animals for food. Also that cruelty, war, and wanton destruction of human life will continue so long as men destroy animals." So really the first part of this statement is simply an extrapolation of Commandment 6 out of the 10 Commandments from the Old Testament. You shall not murder, or you shall not kill is a translation. Many of you probably know it as thou shalt not kill from the King James Version, but I use the New Revised Standard Version, so it's a little bit different. And that is primarily what Harry was pointing out to Charles and Myrtle and that incredibly awkward and uncomfortable dinner at their house. I'm sure it was a little bit tense or weird from then forward, you know. There was nothing to eat after all. He wasn't going to eat, obviously, what was in front of him. So they probably went to Popeye's chickens. I don't know what they did at that point in time. So he's basically pointing out, thou shalt not kill doesn't only apply to humans. And I think it is worthwhile to recognize that the Fillmores must have been made to feel very uncomfortable in that moment, being called out by their friend in the way that this happened. Because it is when we get uncomfortable that we most often experience our greatest growth. Anyone else ever experienced that? When we get uncomfortable, growth is around the corner. And in a sense, their growth led them to the realization that they had been breaking a law. So they put out a little manual that was called, or it's more of a letter, called As to Eating Meat. And in it they said, man is today suffering in his body and mind from the results of transgressed law, and he will continue to suffer until he observes in its fullest degree the command, thou shalt not kill. This transgressed law that they discovered that night with Harry was in no way something new. This wasn't a new realization on the planet. It wasn't the first time anyone had thought of it. In fact, it wasn't even specific to the Bible or the Old Testament or the New Testament at all. Gautama Buddha spoke to this hundreds of years before. He said, whoever destroys living beings extirpates the roots of himself even here in this very world. So people might have assumed, oh, it's a karmic thing. It comes in the next lifetime. He's saying, no, it's happening right now. So let me share a little bit of my own personal journey on this topic, which relates because I, too, was called out on my diet several different times. So let's go back to the year 1989. Who enjoyed that year? Come on. Good year, right? Some of the best. Just everything after that downhill. Totally worthless. Just throw it out. No. So I was the sound guy for this church. I was working for my parents. I was the sound guy for this church, which meant I had to hear every single talk that my dad ever gave without fail, since he was the minister of this church. And on one particular Sunday that year, his talk was about our relationship to our diet and spirituality. You might remember that around this time, there was also a book becoming quite popular, Diet for a New America. Does anybody remember that book or ever heard of that book? Some of you might. This book takes a hard look at how the American diet affects our bodies, the planet, and the animals that we share this planet with. So his talk that Sunday included some of those insights from that book, especially as it pertains to how we treat animals in the food industry, which is basically the same today as it was back then. After that talk, as a 12-year-old boy, I felt morally and spiritually obligated to stop eating meat. Like the Fillmores, I felt in that moment that I had been called out on my diet. And so I did. I became vegetarian when I was 12 years old, which was much harder in those days than it is today. There were practically no vegetarian options on any restaurant menus anywhere you went. It just wasn't a thing. And there was hardly any meat substitutes like we know today, where you have rows and rows of meatballs and patties and sausage links. Like that did not exist in that time. Besides those early veggie burgers that tasted and digested more like hockey pucks than they did like food, they didn't go down all that well. I remember I used to go to McDonald's. When my friends were going to McDonald's, I'd go with them, and I'd order a Big Mac without the meat. And the person behind the counter would actually charge me extra for removing the meat from the Big Mac, and I asked why, and they said, because it's an extra step. I said, actually, it's one less. You don't put it in the first place. And they said, no, the guy in the back's going to put it in, then I'm going to have to take it out. Like, can we bring the guy in the back into the conversation, perhaps? Anyway, so they'd charge me extra because it was an extra step to remove the meat. So, anyway, so it was a little bit difficult back then, especially as a kid going around as a vegetarian. But as I got into my 20s and my 30s, I grew tired of trying to find something on the menu when I'd go out to eat, which I was doing more often as I got older. And so I would allow myself to actually eat fish when I was dining out. That was sort of my caveat. I'd go, most places have fish. I'll just eat fish when I dine out. Now jump to the year 2007. I've been doing this for quite some time, and I got called out yet again. I was on a mountain bike trip trip with my mountain bike group I had in Las Vegas, which had 1,000 members when I left anyway. So we had a very thriving mountain bike group out there that I started, and we would go on these trips. We'd get a cabin up in a mountain pass somewhere, and we'd do all the mountain bike trails around there for a couple of days. It was pretty awesome. So one morning, I'm coming downstairs in the cabin, and I overhear this conversation happening, so I sort of stop and listen. And this is what I heard said from a friend of mine named August. He said, "It makes no sense to me when people call themselves vegetarian and still eat fish. A fish is an animal, and it is hypocritical to say you don't eat animals and still eat fish." He had no idea I was listening in on this conversation, and he was just talking to someone else in the group. So now I had been called out again, and I could no longer justify eating fish, and so I stopped at that point eating fish. I just said, all right, I can't do this. He's right. That just doesn't align with my beliefs. All right, so finally I was called out 2 more times by my wife, Erna, of all people, and we're going to get to that.
Good afternoon, evening. I'm going to sing you a song that's an original song, excuse me, that I wrote very recently. Actually, in fact, you all and the people watching on live stream, this is the first people that are going to hear this song other than me and my girlfriend and her son. So, the song's called Nevermind, and it's about, you charge into life, and in the beginning stages, you're love-driven and finding relationships, and not really as self-aware. Maybe at least I wasn't. I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody, but there's a lot of programming to seek and find that and do that, and then I went into a period in my life where I self-searched only and ignored all of that stuff, and I feel like the balance is somewhere in the middle where you're formulating not just relationships that are romantic relationships, but also cultivating a unified community. And I feel like that's what we do here, very well. And so this song is about growing into your own light and your own self so you can join the others and we can shine together, shine so bright. So this song's called Nevermind. Never mind, is this all I'm meant to find? I've been searching the tide through waves of my emotions. Oh, how could it slip away? Been swept back to the depths of my own mind. Introspective by design, how could it slip away if it was never truly mine? What have I lost along this road? I've silver lined the pieces of my broken heart. You tell me life will never be the same. Well, lonely are the hearts who never trust again. Never mind, this can't be all I'm meant to find. I've been caught in the vines, entangled by devotion. Oh, how can I rip away, stripping back to the essence of my own heart, mend the pieces torn apart and find the strength to say
I must heal in my own way. What have I lost so long ago? I've silver-lined the pieces of my broken heart. You tell me life will never be the same. Well, lonely are the heart who never love again. I've been beaten down in several ways. Oh, oh, oh. Exhausted every hopeful word I would say. Oh, oh, oh. Embrace the shadows cast by my light. Oh, oh, oh. Vow to myself to always shine bright. Self-preservation, well, I will overcome and shine my light. I will shine. I will shine. Collaboration, it's time to unify and shine so bright. We will shine. We will shine. We will shine. So never mind, this can't be all we're meant to find. Unite our hearts and our minds, detangle our emotions.
No? None of this? Still? What's it going to take, Todd? More coffee? No, electric guitar, maybe. Okay. It's got to be our fault. We must beat ourselves up for this. All right. So my wife, Erina, had already been vegan for many years before we met. We met in 2012. And early on in our relationship, she simply asked me, "Why are you still eating eggs and dairy?" Her question came from the fact that she knew I was fully aware of the amount of suffering that's inflicted on animals in the dairy and egg industry, and she called me out. And it no longer felt right to eat those things. Not because of her. Some people may be like, oh, she guilted you into it, or you thought your relationship's going to be in trouble if you didn't go along with it. But because of a moral perspective shift that had been ignited within me. When these things were calling me out, my consciousness would no longer allow me to head in the direction I was going before. It just didn't feel right anymore. But believe it or not, I still had another dietary call-out coming. Later, a few years later, she actually was trying to get me to try to not eat gluten. Has anyone ever been there? And so I just was just blowing her off. I wasn't going to have it because I loved bread, and you weren't going to take that away from me. And I was already eliminated a lot of things from my diet, and you were not going to take my gluten. Well, she tricked me because she challenged me to just not do gluten for 1 week, as if I didn't have the willpower to be able to pull that off. And I think she knew that I can't turn down a challenge. I have a problem in me. I don't turn down challenges, and that's a dangerous thing when you're skiing. But anyway, whole nother story. So she challenged me to see if I could do it for 1 week, just not eat gluten for 1 week. So I did it. And guess what? She was right. That week opened my eyes, and her calling me out on gluten has been the single most impactful thing I have ever done for my body. It was wild. More so than any vitamins or supplement or super drink or workout routine I've put together in my entire life. More than any of that. Apparently, the magic pill for health is one that doesn't have gluten in it. So that's pretty straightforward. For my body anyway, not necessarily everybody's body. But she was recognizing my life, and she said, have you tried gluten? So how does this relate to spirituality? I don't know. You just got to hear me talk about myself, and I enjoy doing that. So I'm sorry that happened. No, for me, each time we are called out, Or I'll say, when in my experience, each time I was called out, I adjusted accordingly because it planted a seed in my consciousness that would not go away, that made things no longer right that I previously thought were okay. And when I did so, I felt more authentic as I was living. I felt more honorable. I felt more whole in my being and more in alignment with my core beliefs. I really felt more in alignment with my core beliefs because there was a little voice in the back of my head saying, you don't think this is right, Shad. But I'll just suppress that voice and say, go away. I love bread. You're an evil devil. You're sent by Satan. You're the anti-bread Satan. I don't know how to get behind me, Satan. So I would just suppress these little voices, like with the fish thing. I was like, well, fish is convenient. I'll eat the restaurants. And I'd be like, nah, I don't know if that's right, Shad. So diet very much affects our wholeness or lack thereof. I think we've all come to that realization. There was a time when we didn't. And if we, like the Fillmores, really believe in oneness, God in and through all things, and the interconnectedness of all beings, we will at some point be faced with the realization that when we harm another being, we bring harm on ourselves. We will be faced with that realization at some point in time or another. Not necessarily like for like, that's not how it works, but for every action there is a reaction. That is sort of the law of the world. And for the Fillmores, their realization even went beyond the simplicity of that law. Let's look at the second half of Statement of Faith number 28, which you might have caught the first time around. Also that cruelty, war, and wanton destruction of human life will continue so long as men destroy animals. So the possibility they are presenting here is, as we harm another being, it doesn't just affect us and that being. It actually goes larger than that. It also feeds into the collective consciousness of all beings and perpetuates the global consciousness of harm. So we are looking at this concept from a much larger scale now that they've presented in the second half here. When consciousness on this planet evolves, the way we interact with everything on this planet will also be called to evolve. Right? Every time our consciousness evolves, the way we live is called to evolve with it. You can't just think and believe one way and not have your life shift to be in alignment with that, or you'll feel some discord, or you'll feel some pressure or some friction happening in your life, which I've talked about several times in these talks. The discord I would have in me and the illness or the frustration that would be there because I was not aligning my beliefs with my lifestyle. So we will be called to evolve, and a shift in perspective creates a shift in relationship. It is an unavoidable eventuality. A shift in perspective will create a shift in relationship. When an old way of thinking evolves, the old way of acting is soon to follow. It just naturally occurs that way. And right now, the consciousness of this planet is evolving. And at each stage of evolution, we as citizens of the planet and participants in the consciousness of the planet are being pulled to evolve with it. That is how the collective consciousness works. We feed into it, we receive from it, it is pulling us in different directions, and we are investing in the consciousness we want into that collective consciousness with everything we do. The shift happening all around us, the shift is happening all through us right now as we sit here today. And Charles Fillmore spoke about this in his book, Christian Healing. He said, the new heaven and the new earth that are now being established among people and nations the world over are based on love. When we understand each other, love increases. This is true not only among people, but between mankind and the animal world, and even between mankind and the vegetable world. The relationships on this planet are shifting, and the spiritual teachers of old that we often look back to for wisdom knew it would be necessary. Mahatma Gandhi said, the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Buddha said, one is not called noble who harms living beings, but by not harming living beings, one is called noble. So let's think about the human consciousness evolution thus far as it's been experienced on the planet today. There was a time when children were seen as a great source of inexpensive labor. But consciousness shifted on this planet, and we recognized that that no longer aligned with our consciousness. We had shifted out of that old paradigm, and that no longer aligned with our new consciousness. There was a time when human slavery was considered to be a good business practice in this country. But consciousness shifted, and we recognized that that no longer aligned with our consciousness. There was a time when women were considered to be the property of men. But guess what? Consciousness shifted, and we recognized that it no longer aligned with our consciousness, and things changed. Shift happens all the time, on the microcosm in our personal lives, on the macrocosm, on the world around. Shift happens all the time. And we as humans get called out all the time by other people, by society, by consciousness itself. And we can try to ignore it, which we often do at first, and which I was doing many of the times when I got called out in that process. But our consciousness will only allow that for so long. There will either be friction with us, within us, or there'll be something outside of us that puts a mirror onto us so we get to see ourselves. So what is next for consciousness? What is the next big consciousness shift that is calling us forward at this time? I might be a little bit biased, but there are some facts that brought me to a realization. I looked at the statistics. The total combined deaths of the 6 largest human genocides that have ever happened on this planet is 16,736,734. The total of number animal deaths each day for food is 410,958,904. That is a mind-blowing statistic, and the type of statistics that stuck in my consciousness at each stage of my being called out and asked to step forward in a new awareness. Which reminds me of one of the most memorable lines from the movie Star Wars for me when I think about this statistic. You might remember Obi-Wan Kenobi saying this. I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I feel something is terrible has happened. Consciously or not, I believe every one of us is feeling this cry out from our animal brothers and sisters. I believe the next major shift in human consciousness and perspective is happening right now as we sit in this very room on this planet. And we are being called out, we are being called up to elevate our perspective and how we look at the world. Shifts can be uncomfortable. They quite often are. Even talking about the things that are calling us to shift makes it very uncomfortable for us. But like all great shifts, it gets to a point where we can't resist it any longer. We'll be called to do something in our lives. The feeling of oneness will become unavoidable for us. The feeling of our interconnectedness will become unavoidable. Our consciousness will merge with all consciousness, and these words from Christ will echo through the chambers of our very being when he said, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Now, I just gave you my very biased approach and opinion to this topic. I will admit that, and I'll leave you with this. Everything in its time. The Fillmores were called out by Harry at a specific point in their lives when they were probably ready for it, or when they were probably needing that specific call out by that specific individual. Harry might have said anything else at that dinner, and it might have sent them in a whole other direction, but they received the message they needed to receive at that moment at that dinner. I was called out in various ways, and it wasn't always about animals, it was about gluten one time. And that changed my life more drastically than any times I stopped eating animal products. We each get called out in our right and perfect time in the right and perfect way. Nobody gets to decide for you what is right. Nobody gets to tell you how to be spiritual. Not me or anyone else. That is not something that should be happening, but does. People can share their insights and tools that have worked for them. That's a beautiful practice to be a part of. But it is always and ultimately between you and your consciousness, between you and God for the directions you're going to take in life. Anyone else is just flapping their lips. If something rings true for you, you have the opportunity to do what the Fillmores did and say, does this sound like truth? Do I need to readjust my life to align with that truth? I believe that, Unity believes that, and so did the Fillmores, as a matter of fact. Someone actually wrote into a column in Unity magazine in 1991, and it was called Viewpoints, and they said this: why is it that people who come into Unity and accept it as a way of life continue to eat meat? The Inquirer asked. The editorial reply confirmed the vegetarian ways of Charles Fillmore, but added, just as God created us and free will to make decisions, Mr. Fillmore believed that we had that same right. It was more important that each individual have the freedom to seek spiritual growth as the individual feels is best, the editor said. This is our path. This is our life. This is our choices. And the only thing we have to answer to on this planet is our own higher awareness and God. That is all. And that is the truth as I experience it. Now, everyone take a deep breath. We made it through. If there was anything triggered or anything sensitive that came up, we're all safe. We're all okay. So let's do a little bit of time in the silence and meditation. So I invite you to continue that deep breath, to become still and aware, to become open-minded and clear, to sit with your back straight if comfortable and your eyes closed, your shoulders relaxed, your thoughts settling, your heart calming, your breath slowing, your existence becoming, your awareness expanding, your truth unfolding, your peace embracing. We feel ourselves settling down, turning within, and finding clarity of purpose, clarity of insight, clarity of direction. What is mine to do in this experience? I know I hear what the news is saying. I know I hear what the people around me are saying. I'm constantly being told of what I should be afraid of, the terror I should be preparing for, the way I should live and think and eat and be. But what is right for me if I turn within and listen? What if I tune out the five senses that have been receiving this information from the outside world and I simply tuned in to the only true sense that matters, which we might call intuition, the still small voice, our higher awareness, the whisper of spirit. As I walk this life, I am exposed to opportunities. That is all. I'm exposed to opportunities to go in one direction or another, to listen to my heart, to see what feels right, to see if this opportunity is meant for me or not. No matter the news I hear, no matter the information I receive, I check it against my heart by going within and validating its truth. Not because someone said it was true, not because someone showed me a study, not because the media perpetuated as much they could, but I go within and I say, is this true? And I listen and I feel and I find direction. Feels good to tap in, to reconnect, to tune out for just a little while, to be one with. And as we come out of this time together in silence and meditation, we hold on to this relaxation that we felt, and we remember this tool of turning in. So it is. And when we're ready, we can open our eyes. Our mission here is transforming lives, inspiring people to make a positive difference in our world. This is a twofold process. One is the internal work in ourselves. The other is the external work to help other people evolve as well, to help them have a leg up, to get into a situation where they can actually have time and resources to think about spirituality. Because that's not something that everyone has access to or the time to deal with. So that's part of what we do here, transforming ourselves, transforming the world around us. And we do this by supporting Unity of Boulder because that supports both of those. We're supporting the place that helps our own transformation and that also supports the community transformation around us. We give of our time and service and of our abundance through our financial contributions, because it is through giving that we open this flow of abundance in our lives, which we're studying quite in depth in our 90% class, which we'll be wrapping up next week. So we do have many ways to give here. We have digital ways to give. We have physical ways to give with the baskets in the back. And if you're watching via live stream, we invite you to join us in many of these digital ways to give. If you are here for the first time, I'd like to let you know, don't worry about making a financial contribution today. Just do us a favor and fill out the Next Step card that's in the seat pocket in front of you, and you can drop that in the basket in the back, and we'll really embrace that information from you. All right.
You guys ready to rock? This is probably going to be the most rocking song we've done so far, so enjoy. Give me a word, give me a sign, show me where to look, tell me what will I find. Will I find? Lay me on the ground, fly me in the sky. Show me where to look, tell me what will I find? Will I find? Here we go. Yeah. Yeah. Whoa. Heaven, let your light shine down. 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 Love is in the water, love is in the air. Show me where to look, tell me will love be there? Will love be there. Teach me how to speak, teach me how to share, teach me where to go, tell me will love be there? Will love be there? Here we go! Yeah. Yeah. Whoa. Heaven, let your light shine down. 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 Show me where to look, tell me what will I find? Will I find? Lay me on the ground, fly me in the sky. Show me where to look, tell me will I be there? Will I be there? Yeah. 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 Whoa. Heaven, let your light shine down. 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 Oh, we're gonna let it shine. We're gonna let it shine. Heaven's little light gonna shine on me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Heaven's little light's gonna shine on me. It's gonna shine, shine on me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're gonna shine. Come on and shine. Thank you.
Still no. All right. Well, thank you for being here. This was live streamed on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, so if you want to share that with your friends and family, or if you want to check it out again, you can do that. I do like to remind you that we do have the 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. services tomorrow, so if you want to get more of that, you can be a part of that. And then I do lead a Monday meditation at 5:30 p.m. in our meditation room downstairs, if you ever want to get in that meditative mode with a group. We do have a spring equinox celebration coming up with Norma Groverland. It's March 19th at 8 p.m. And we also have a affirmative meditative prayer class that will be starting March 17th at 6 p.m. And that you can actually take for Unity SEE credit if you're interested in that. We also have a membership class coming up Sunday, March 29th at 1 p.m. So if you're interested in membership, you can ask any one of us about that. We have more information on the table back there, and we really encourage everyone to become members. And you'll find out why at the membership class. All right, there are some plant-based informational things on the table out there if you're curious about a plant-based diet. And there is a book that a friend of ours, Reverend Carol, wrote, who's a Unity minister, about the Fillmore's experience with their vegetarian diet throughout their time here. It's a quick, short little book. It's a good read, and we purchased those so that if you want one, you can have it and just take it. It's out there on the table as well. Okay, now I almost got through this and forgot. I'd tell you why they got banned. Why number 28 and 29 got banned from the Unity movement. 28 was about sex and spirituality, and 28 was the vegetarian, 29 was sex and spirituality. Well, for obvious reasons, they tend to be topics that people aren't expecting to hear when they come to church. And actually, their son, after the Fillmores died, their children sort of took over the movement and were president of the movement. And one of their sons, Lowell, as I understand, was a hunter. And he was not very keen on the vegetarian concept, being a part of the Unity movement. So in the next printing of the Unity Statements of Faith that went out to the field and the public, those two were removed. And from the archives, Dear Lowell, this is 2/14/1949, so February 14th. In the edition of Unity's Statement of Faith that we are now using, so this new released version they're talking about, paragraphs 28 and 29 as given in the original edition have been omitted, and other paragraphs have been given these numbers. This should not have been done. We should have this pamphlet as originally written by your father. Paragraph 28, original, states facts. Paul said in Romans 14:19, let us follow after things which make for peace. The whole world is crying, peace, peace, and there is no peace because the world insists on following after things which make for war. This was written by just the initials WKM, which I assume was a Unity minister that was not so excited about the fact that those are missing. So I'll put this on the table out there as well if you want to look at that. And someone actually asked if they could have copies of the Statements of Faith as they originally printed. So I printed those out, and those are back there as well. Okay, I've talked enough. We're going to do fellowship out in the lobby, but first let's stand up and say hello to each other. If you're not keen on a handshake, you can do an elbow bump, a knee bump, an ankle bump, a butt bump, whatever works for you.